Hi, everyone. Welcome to the How We Hustle podcast.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Tanya. And we invite you to join us in our unfiltered conversation about the real life hustle of being an entrepreneur. For more information about the podcast, check out howwehustlepodcast.com. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at How We Hustle Podcast, where you'll get notable quotes from our episodes and updates on live new episodes. So head over to Instagram and follow us at How We Hustle Podcast. Hey, so today we want to just share with you guys that we are focusing on something different because we started this podcast thinking that we wanted to share the behind the scenes of what it's like to be an entrepreneur, the stuff that people weren't sharing online. And I think that right now, something that's feeling like close to our heart is being more vulnerable and sharing with you guys what it's really like to be an entrepreneur, like in our life, not just business, but what our lifestyle is like and what we're dealing with behind the scenes as our being. We are being entrepreneurs rather than what we're doing.
Yeah, we're approaching our 100th episode, and that's taken us about 2 years to get there. Over the last 2 years, a lot has changed. And throughout those 2 years, we've kind of come at this podcast from a few different angles and tried to really kind of, sometimes it's mindset, sometimes it's tactics. And I think that, Tanya, you and I have decided that really what we like the most, and I think what is getting the most, is resonating the most with the people that listen is just being real, So, sometimes one of the things that I have worried about in terms of the way I approach the podcast is just how do I present myself? Like I put pressure on myself to come off as the expert. And sometimes I don't always feel like the expert because I've got like struggles in my own business. I'm not the world's smartest, greatest, best entrepreneur. I'm like struggling and I'm like, laying awake at night being like, my business is stressing me out. And then I have to, record a podcast and I'm like, I have to pretend that I don't have those feelings. But that's not serving anyone. It's not serving myself. It's not serving people that are listening. So kind of want to just be open that like this podcast is we're not here because we are the smartest people ever. We're just here to really just share the journey that we're going through. And, just being open about that, it just makes it easier it redefines, establishes the purpose of what we're doing on this podcast and why we're showing up to share who we are and what we're doing. It's not because we have all the answers. It's because we want to just, build a community and resonate and, just share what it's really like to be an entrepreneur.
And for me, I definitely want anyone listening to know that they're not alone, that the things that we're going to be sharing are things that we're experiencing that you're probably experiencing. And so that that just because you're feeling that way, like the way that Mike just shared that he's feeling like stressed about his business or that he lies awake at night thinking about it or that he feels like he has to put on this brave face of like, I am the expert, that all of us feel like that imposter syndrome, that are we really this person that we're presenting to the world? Or is this like a dream? Like I want to be this person. This is who I want people to see me as. But like behind the scenes, I don't necessarily feel like that all the time. And I always think about that too with my business that, I lead a group and I lead this podcast or like my videos or a Facebook group or soon to be a membership site. So I'm like, am I really the leader? Am I really somebody that people should be looking up to? And like sometimes I look around and think, who the F am I? Like, who is this person? Like, the identity that I had was that I was afraid of public speaking, like that I never spoke in a big group, that my voice didn't matter, that my opinions were not going to help anybody, that I had nothing good to say, that I had nothing important to say. And that kind of thinking doesn't help anyone.
Yeah. So it's really not about us like talking at, anymore. I think that we lost I lost anyway, a little bit of my sort of direction on this podcast. And, we want to talk about the life of an entrepreneur, not about telling you how to be an entrepreneur. It's about sharing our lives with you. Yeah. So, what can we say on that level? Really, it's like being vulnerable is something that is really what we want to kind of focus on going forward, is really just being maybe more open and on, and hiding less. I've been hiding, sort of faking who I am a little bit to myself, and not wanting to share myself as authentically and vulnerably as deep down I want to do. And I feel like I've lost a little bit of connection in how I've been presenting myself. So I want to get that back.
And I was doing a bunch of calls with my clients. Like, I do this workshop called Share Your Story, and it has nothing to do with business, because I really believe that you can't coach the business without the person. So it's a space for them to like share vulnerably, and to see that like there are people in this group that are going through the same thing as they are, and that they're not alone. So that's kind of what I was hoping that we could do here, is like sharing some of our vulnerable sides, so that you guys can find out that you're not alone, that we have similar experiences, or that you feel connected to us, and that you and I, Mike, are sharing things that even make us feel more connected too.
Yeah, and that's we did a little bit of that in the last podcast, where I talked about some of the struggles with kind of clinging on to my former identity, and then sort of what my identity is going forward, and struggles of starting a new business. When we started this podcast, I was in a much different business place, and I've been beaten up a little bit since then, yet not really wanting to admit that and be real about that. But that's just normal, changing, like, life evolves, business evolves.
And I think before you were bored because it wasn't evolving.
Yeah. Like if you're a star athlete, well, one day you're a star athlete, 2 days later you're getting cut. 2 years later you're being cut from the team. And that's, it's kind of like things change, like one day things are going great, and the next day you're having challenges that you maybe didn't realize you were going to have, or you didn't expect would come your way. Because,
I remember saying to you, Mike, back then, being like, oh gosh, do you know what you're in for? Because like I was in the thick of it back then, and I was like, oh God, like who would choose to go back to this feeling? And you were like, no, I'm excited to go back to that feeling. And I was like, really? But like now it's like, I think you had forgotten like what it's like to be vulnerable and try things and fail, and like know that you're going to get back up again.
Yeah. So, what you're referring to is when we started this podcast, I had a business that I've been doing for many years, and it was going really well. I won't say it was going really well, is maybe a misstatement of it. It was churning, making money, but it wasn't going well in the sense that it was like just kind of stagnant and just operating status quo. So I wanted to sell it and switch it up and do something new. And you were sort of saying, do you know how hard it is to start something new? And I was like, whatever.
Because I was like, why don't you just keep it and like then start something new on the other side? And then you're like, well, I can't focus on two things at once.
Yeah. And yeah, you're right. Like I have experienced all these challenges. One of the bigger challenges is like an identity like crisis. Mm-hmm. And it's like, once you sell your business, then who are you, And this is something I've been dealing with over the last year and a bit. Trying to figure out, okay, well, who am I as an entrepreneur now? And when it comes
also, who are you as a man?
Yeah. And on this podcast, that's something that maybe I was a little bit reluctant to get vulnerable about, because, at the end of the day, we have this business podcast, and I think a lot of our episodes have been sort of, kind of, at least the way I see it, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the way I see it is telling people how to be entrepreneurs. And, we've reflected on sort of the direction we want to go forward. And that's like the way I see it now. It's not about us telling people how to do it. It's about us sharing our experience with other people so that we can create collectivity and, a tribe, if you will. And
a community. I think like what you're saying is like, I also think that podcasting alone is kind of like lonely, because we never really get to talk to the people that listen to our podcast unless someone says like, oh, I listened to your podcast. Like we never get to hear like, oh, that really resonated with me. Like you never really get to hear like when building a community is like how we feel more connected as people.
Yeah. And it's also nice to just, just kind of like get clarity on what we want this to be, and then just do it. Like, when we say vulnerable things on this podcast, of which, we have done, I have done in the last year, there's been moments where, I've shared stuff, and like, I'm not present there when people start downloading it, but just knowing that I put it out there, like, it's sort of nice to, it gives me connection, even though I'm not necessarily in that person's ear, like physically, but knowing that people are going to listen to me being vulnerable, it gives me a little bit of connection to maybe the I'm going to say like the universe, put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Question for you. Do you maybe want to chat about like what tribe has like, wanting a tribe or needing a community, or like what community means to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's belonging, it's, as I said in the last podcast, when you look around you in the world we live in, it's like most people are doing things differently, especially when it comes to working jobs. A lot of people will kind of get their identity from a job. So when we're looking around and most of our peers have jobs and that's where their identity comes from, we can feel really left out, and we can start second guessing whether or not we've taken the right path. As I was saying, like a lot of my peers now are pretty high up in the corporate world, whether or not they're partners or vice presidents or presidents or whatever. And it's like, it's easy to look at people who have had success on that level and second guess whether or not entrepreneurship was the right thing. But when you connect yourself with others that are kind of on your wavelength, then you get belonging again, and you get more confidence, and you start to reconnect with your own purpose and remind yourself why you're doing it, why you chose the path that you chose. When you see other people that you click with, then it gives you a little bit more of a fire in your step to continue on the path that you've chosen for yourself. And
I think also like at least most of my community is like all over the world. Like they're not really, some of them are in Toronto, but like majority of them are like all over the world, which is, means that you don't get to necessarily see them as often. But I think it's always so interesting that the people that know me online probably know more about me than my regular everyday friends.
Yeah. And that's kind of cool too, because you don't have to, it's almost more comfortable to be vulnerable with people in different cities. It's almost a buffer, It's like the stuff I say on this podcast is public domain, but it's a lot of the people closest to me have never heard me say it, and they're not about to, like, I've said some of this stuff on this podcast that I would really have a hard time saying at the dinner table with my family, And
I don't talk about it with my family. That's for sure.
Yeah, there's just, it's because the people listening to this podcast understand me in a way, understand my context in a way that others don't. So it's
I've been sharing a lot too with my clients that like when my family like makes comments to me about my business, or like sometimes they say like, oh, how's your little business going? Or, oh yeah, like how's that going? Are you still like not working? Like it's not that I'm not working, it's that I'm running a business. It's a little different. So like some of those comments can like hurt. And I don't necessarily think that they're meant for that. I think that what they're trying to say, even though it doesn't feel like it, is that they love you. They don't want anything bad to happen to you. They care about you. So I try to reframe that. But I tend to not talk about it as often because, like, you don't want to have to deflect or reflect what's coming at you and reframe it, because you'd rather just not hear it.
Yeah. Every week I see my mom like at least once a week, and usually when I had dinner with her on the weekends, she says to me kind of like, so how's
like they're afraid to ask.
How's the business going? And I'm like, kind of like, it's going fine. She's like, thank goodness. Are you making money? And it's like, I just like, I
How
find
do you
that
think
question.
I'm living?
I find that question so annoying.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Or sometimes I get the question of like, who would pay that?
Because the problem with that question is it's not about, it's
They're saying, I'm concerned about you. I love you. I don't want anything bad to happen to you.
the question doesn't come from a place of understanding my mission or my purpose or why I've chosen. It's more just about black and white, like, are you making money? And I want to be like, if you think this is about money, you don't understand me at all.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. Like, I feel like they don't really understand. And I honestly feel like I try to remind myself that the reason that they don't understand is because they've never seen us in that light. I find my clients that have their parents that are like really supportive of them online. It's mainly because like they're actually watching them online. They're paying attention to what they're posting. They're watching their videos. Like they're engaged in it. And as much as I think that our parents care about us, I don't think if they're not engaged and they're not seeing you being a badass at whatever it is that you're doing online or in your business, that it's hard for them to imagine you doing something.
Yeah. And I intentionally don't really talk about my business with, people in my family, etc., like that don't really understand, as I said, the context, because I don't want to get opinions and advice kind of from people that don't really know where I'm coming from, because it's just not the kind of advice I want to get. It's like getting snowboarding advice from someone who's only ever watched snowboarding on television. It's like,
remember when we used to teach snowboarding together, Mike? I totally forgot that we used
I don't really want to get snowboarding advice from someone who's never tried it.
Or like I always use the example of like nobody who hasn't been a parent should be giving parenting advice. Doesn't matter how many parenting books you've read or how many babies you've babysat, like you shouldn't be giving advice. Like unless you've had a human come out of your body or you've created a human with your sperm, then you should not be giving advice about parenting. Same thing with business. If you haven't run your own business, if you haven't run a successful business or a failure or a business that failed, like you don't get it. You don't understand like the stress or the anxiety or the fear or the like courage that it takes to literally wake up every day and freaking do it. Like not just talk about it, but actually be doing it and living with it every single day. Because like do you worry about like how are you going to pay for your rent next month? Like, don't you guys think we think about that? Like, don't you think we already know that we need to pay rent? Like, it's not something that I just like forget about.
Yeah, but simplifying it to that question just is like so annoying, because it's like that's not what it's about. Of course I think about money. It's like the fact that you just asked me if I'm making money. It wasn't like that was the first time I thought about it.
Yeah.
It's like, don't worry, I already know that I need to make money. It's like, thank you for your
Believe
concern,
us,
but
we're
it's
working
not
on
really,
it. Like we do that every day.
But when it's just like it's hard, and it's like I find my mom, when she asked me that question, she's not doing it from a place of trying to like really get under my skin. She's doing it from a place of concern.
Love.
Yeah, but it's like super. So anyway, this is back to like the whole community thing, right? It's like when you share yourself, and you're able to, vulnerable, but with the right people. I won't say the right people, but the people that get it, then that's empowering. And that,
well, like-minded people that understand you, that like have the same sorts of thoughts or thought processes as you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and it's like that, and then you get feedback from those people, and they're like, love it. Like it's like that's where you get the.
Or even like Mike, before we started taping this podcast, like Mike and I were just like brainstorming some new business ideas because like we think that's exciting and fun. Other than like if I had said that or if you had said that to someone else and it wasn't to each other, someone else would have been like, well, and they would have come up with all the reasons why you can't do that or all the problems you would have.
Like, I can't sit down at a dinner table with like other people and be like, what do you think of this business idea? All I'm going to get is, well, it's not going to work because of this. Those are the reasons why it's not going to work and you shouldn't do it. It's like, that's not helpful to me. It's like,
yeah. And like literally like you were coming up with some reasons why things could get in the way. And I was like, well, there's always a way around it.
Yeah. So yeah, that's why like we value our conversations with each other, because we take an approach that's purposeful and like gets somewhere, and like we both we share a mindset. So
But honestly, like, I just also want to say that, like, I didn't start out with this mindset, Mike. Like, before you, like, I didn't have this mindset. Like, I met you, you imprinted this on me. And like, I think I was maybe open to it, but I wasn't. Like, I think I had to go through like stages. And for some reason, like, that's something you should patent, another business idea for you, Mike, of like how you shifted my mindset very slowly. You introduced it, then you gave me like Rich Dad Poor Dad to read. And like that opened my mind up to like so many new possibilities. If anyone on this podcast has not read Rich Dad Poor Dad, I highly recommend it. It's super easy to read, very basic. An 8-year-old could understand those concepts. So, and like, I think that opened my mind up to like all the other things to come, and like the 4-Hour Workweek and all those types of books that then you and I had like more conversations about it. So I think it also takes like someone who's like a little bit wanting to learn and like open-minded. And like, I kind of have the stance now that if someone approaches me about it, like I've had friends come to me, or a couple of friends come to me and ask me about it, and I'm totally open to sharing it with them. But also like in stages, like if I like verbal diarrhea all over them, like they're not going to get it. I have to like be cognizant of the fact that, you know, we talk a little bit in jargon. So we need to like dumb it down a little, and not because they are dumb, but like just because they're new to this whole world.
Other people definitely are not dumb. Like, and I don't want to say that we're dumb as if we're not putting other people down. We're just, aware of who kind of, you know, who is like-minded and who's not. And like, there's lots of people, and like, you know, if you used to be in insurance, right? There are some very successful and brilliant insurance minds, and they're not about to talk about insurance with us.
I like to pretend that I was a brilliant insurance mind. I think I conquered insurance, but I think like honestly, like insurance for me was like you had to be very open-minded. I remember when I first started, my very first boss, he said to me, Tanya, you can either say no to everything, because like that's the easy way out. You can be the no underwriter. You can say no about everything. Sure. But the only way for you to make money is for you to say yes to something. So find a reason to say yes and stop looking for reasons to say no.
My point was not to suggest that you weren't brilliant. It was just that there are insurance tribes out there that look for like-minded people to talk about insurance. And
True.
I still think that's fun. But yeah, like I think that it's about like baby steps, crumbs, as I always call it, like leaving crumbs. Make them interested in you. And they can ask questions to you, rather than like if we're like, oh my God, this amazing thing is happening, and they're just like, huh? Because that just feels like shitty. And like celebrating with a tribe that gets you. Like find a person that gets you. And if you can't, there's tons of people online. There's tons of Facebook groups, including mine, where you can celebrate with people. Like find someone who can celebrate with you. Find people who you can like share ideas with or talk on the phone about. Like get excited about it, because it feels real shitty and it doesn't really help your mindset. But like, oh my God, like nobody gets me. Nobody understands this. Nobody believes this. And why do I believe it?
And that's a wrap on another episode of How We Hustle. For more information, check out howwehustlepodcast.com.